Whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I think the camera that's on is the one that's right here in the center. So if I'm looking around trying to find where the cameras are, so many cameras in here, so many cameras in this room now, you have to search them out. And there are two monitors right here on the two sides. So I know we are growing as a studio.
Yeah, the one that's got the one straight up here. You can see this is the one closer to the window is you're on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the one over there I switch back and forth over to the side.
Yeah, John, it's getting too much sophistication here. I'm not a tech person, so when I come in and watch all this technology developing before my very eyes, I get real shocked here that we are this studio now that we have come so far in the last 7 years that I've been here. And it's just amazing how many cameras we have in the studio right now. And we're doing some things upstairs as well. So with your continued support, we're going to get there. We're going to challenge all of the stations out there. I'm talking about some of the major networks out there, the alphabet soup on cable, and challenging them for the number one, well, maybe not number one station on television, but certainly the podcast programs. We can compete with them on that level. And we're going to be here for the long run. I don't think we're going anywhere. Seems like the studio is developing and continuing to grow. Well, today is the Monday after Labor Day, and I thought we would continue the conversation we had last week. We were talking about how we need to honor also the business community, because without them, the labor would not have anything to do. And I did notice in my travels in Africa, where I was in 4 countries, I did notice that where there was an absence of the entrepreneurial class, there was also an absence of those persons that had anything really of any sufficient productivity to do with their hands. In fact, one guy told me when I was in Gambia, he said, "There's no work here." And I understood what they were saying. I was looking at it all over the country. And there's no work there because the class that has been allowed to exist in this country up until the present time, although there are some problems with the class being under attack, and Atlas Shrugged is going to be our fate at the rate we're going again. I mean, Ayn Rand wrote about that 70 years ago, but in the countries where I was, they weren't even allowed to develop in the first place. And when I'm on the continent, I'm always reminded of what happened in 1957 when the British left in Ghana, where I was in 2006. And when the British left in 1957, they left the power fell in the hands of Kwame Nkrumah, who was a politician who had been in the United States for 10 years, from 1935 to 1945, and had gone back home, having been invited there by a philosopher, teacher, and writer named J.B. Danquah, who was leading an independence movement in Ghana, and had heard about Nkrumah over here. And Nkrumah had gone to London between 45 and 47. He said to Nkrumah, "It's time for you to come back home." Not knowing that when Nkrumah went back home, Nkrumah's going to take his Western education and seek to take over the reins of power, not share with anybody. So anyway, when the British left, then Nkrumah stood up in the British's place and did pretty much the same thing the British was doing, but it was on automatic pilot and on steroids. And 9 years later, in 1966, they are running a coup d'etat on Nkrumah's administration, because Nkrumah was throwing everybody in jail that had been out there fighting with him to remove the colonists from the land space. And when Nkrumah got in power, he was more tyrannical in some ways than they were. And so anyway, the fate of Africa really, I think, at that point starts off with Nkrumah. And what you notice when you go there is that the entrepreneurial class has not been allowed to develop in many parts of Africa, and therefore, as a result, you see the squalid conditions that you run into in those African countries.
You know, it's like in my observation too. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I know that in South Africa they had a big influx of Indians, from India,
Mm-hmm.
Indians, and they were the entrepreneurial class, and they were looked down upon. I guess I don't know if you read this too, but I was on YouTube, and there's some other. I done research after I did that. that Mahatma Gandhi, when he was writing about the conditions in Africa, he was writing, actually, he was protesting the British treatment of the Indians there. He wasn't saying much about the treatment of the blacks there because he was a racist. I mean, he referred to them as Kaffirs.
Yeah.
A lot of the South Afrikaners himself, the Afrikaners would say that.
Yeah.
And, but that's what they resented, I guess, after the British pulled out. A lot of the Indian people had business there, and they were basically they're still not liked. But I was wondering if Gambia and these other countries where the British were at, do they also have a presence of the Indian, like the entrepreneurial class, the managerial class?
Yes.
Do they also have that in others?
Yeah, you're very discerning in your comments about Gandhi. Gandhi's not well understood, and his legacy has been misappropriated. Certainly when you talk about Dr. King having gotten inspiration from Gandhi, there would be a total contradiction in terms of what King stood for and what Gandhi stood for in terms of the civil rights as it relates to blacks. Gandhi was in opposition to those rights, and to some extent was an agent of apartheid in South Africa, only as related to the blacks. His concern was that the coloreds, which he was in that particular group, I mean, they had a hierarchy of the races, and the Boers and British at the top, and then in the middle were the coloreds, and then the blacks at the bottom. Gandhi was not so much against the bottom tier. He was complaining about how his group was being treated. And correctly realized that the problem that the Indians were facing could not be resolved in South Africa. They had to be resolved by making India strong, and that's when Gandhi went back, finally got a light and went back to India and began to fight for the independence of India so that they would have a homeland from which they could launch their freedom efforts anywhere else in the world. You got to have a home base. And I can even go and say this, and I'm going back to what I was saying earlier, but I want to say this as well, that I think when Langston Hughes wrote this poem called, where he said that they cut my hands off in the Congo and they lynched me still in Mississippi, I think what Langston Hughes should have said and would have said more accurately if he had stated that they cut the hands off in the Congo, which allows for the lynching to go on in Mississippi. In other words, if one thing is not going on, then it interferes with the possibility of the other thing going on. And so the two are not separate entities. They are one, and they're the flip sides of the same coin. And one of those issues affects the other issue. When you get one resolved, it helps to resolve the other, and that's what Gandhi found out. I'm not one of the persons that worship Gandhi. I do understand Gandhi's role, and of course I have no problem with him having fought for the independence of the Indian people. Now, to your question about are they a presence, financial presence in Africa? They are a presence, and Africa, by and large, Africa is not really run by by those who are indigenous to the continent. A lot of the entrepreneurial group members that are running the economies of Africa and making the inroads into Africa's development are not people that are indigenous to the continent, and that's because there's a class of workers and entrepreneurs that have the skills that are not Western. In fact, John, I think you will remember that Ayn Rand was talking about that when she was saying that, she's talking about the oil in the Middle East, and she was saying that when they were saying this is our oil, her comment was, it's been in the ground all those years, and it was inaccessible to the ones who own the land space. And it was Western technology that allowed them to have access to it. So the Western, her thing was, the Westerners had as much right to it as the one indigenous to the land space, because it was the Western skills, and it's still the skills of the West, that allowed the access to the oil to take place. They're not doing that they don't have that skill in Saudi Arabia. Those are Western skills they're using.
Yeah, I think it's like everything comes from the West. Everything, I mean, Dinesh D'Souza in his first book, and I saw him speak soon after that book came out, Liberal Education. He said he was at some protest probably at Stanford University, and they're saying, Western Civ has got to go, and they're showing up driving cars, speaking on cell phones, wearing windbreakers, wearing tennis shoes, jeans, everything we had was from the Western culture, Western civilization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you didn't see people wearing tribal gowns and dresses and, you know, headdresses and all. It was none of that, you know. So
That's right.
everything they were talking about striking against was from Western civilization.
Yes, and John, we have to be real about that and be honest with ourselves. The West has played a pivotal role in the productive capacities of the world. In fact, the world is taking off because it has imbued itself with the ideals that were born in the West and born primarily in the United States. And as we abandon those ideals to our own peril and detriment, the other part of the world that was undeveloped is developing around the ideals that we are now vacating. I mean, that's what explains what you're seeing in the nations that are more free than we are at this point, as far as the economy is concerned. And I'm talking here about Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, and those countries that are now developing. Even Mexico is quiet as it's kept. Their economy is churning at about 2 to 3% a year. And that's why I knew that those immigrants were not coming into this country from Mexico. They're coming from other parts of the Latin American region, in countries that have stuck to the socialist policies that are not working, have not worked, and will not work. And as a result of that, they have this immigration that's exiting out of the country, trying to go to those places that are doing much better. And we are on the edges of the capitalist system. We are still drinking in the fumes of the capitalist network, which is still productive even at the edges, and they're coming here to take advantage of that.
You know, even the communists, I've met up with communists who would say, you know, they're all for communism, but they have to say that initially, for the start of the civilization, the impetus created by a capitalist desire, you know, desires of the capitalist, that's the best thing for actually building up and tapping into the resources. But yeah, but there are many in this huge indebtedness, but now they want to tweak it and have a command economy. And these people, communists, in my opinion, I've dealt with them from the academic level and from the kind of the people who don't even know they're communists and stuff. It's a religion that has been failed time and time again. I mean, their God is dead. I mean, it's not only dead, it's putrefying in the corner, and they still can't acknowledge it.
Yeah, because they attribute it to the personalities of the ones who have tried to bring about the communist result, which is supposed to be utopia for all of its people, with egalitarian for all, with the government acting as Santa Claus and having enough wherewithal to pass out to all the persons and making sure that there is this basic thrust of the communist idea from each according to what he can do, to each according to his needs. And that what they have not come to understand and recognize is that is a disabling philosophy, because if you make it minimum of what a person has to contribute in order to receive his wherewithal to live in an egalitarian society, then of course his productive efforts will be reduced, because whatever the production is, the outcome will be the same. And how do you stimulate production under that particular umbrella? They have not awakened to, and this is not a matter of personality. It's not Stalin, it's not V.I. Lenin who failed. It is the philosophy itself that has failed, and wherever it's tried, it has not been it has not met with any kind of success. And I saw it when I was in Africa, and it just reminded me again that we do not, in fact, understand and do not appreciate, even at this late date in this country, that we have a legacy here that we have not paid a lot of attention to. And I'm reading a lot of it in books that I'm reading some really good books now that I've gotten away from just reading all of the orthodox writers. You know, you have a tendency in the university to read the writers who are more orthodox in terms of having a certain amount of acceptance in academia. But when you start to read those writers that are not so much in the purview of the quote-unquote scholars at the university campuses, and you start reading writers who are not even mentioned, people like Thomas Woods, although he has a PhD degree, you don't hear his name mentioned that much. His book, I don't think anybody is teaching out of this book, called The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. And here's a book by another writer, and you're gonna be hard pressed to find him discussed anywhere on these university campuses, although he's a major scholar named Charles Adams. And I read a couple of his books. This is the third one I'm reading now. those one of his books is called "Those Dirty Rotten Taxes," and then this is a much larger book called "For Good and Evil: The Impact of Taxes on the Course of Civilization." And Charles Adams is a major scholar, but you won't see it mentioned because there's this socialism that's taken hold on the college campuses in this country, and people would be surprised to find out how much of a turning their backs on capitalism is exiting on these college campuses. I mean, these campuses are so far to the left that you would not even think that they were ever campuses that produced scholars from the right, because there's so few people on these campuses right now that are thinking in that channel. It's a whole different outlook that's being promoted on the college campus today.
When I was studying philosophy at U of M Flint, I was asking the professor, he was a feminist, the male feminist. I don't know how that really works, but anyway, I was asking him about Ayn Rand, and he just gave me this contemptuous look, rolled his eyes, and I went, and I like, here's like, to me, it's like, I'm wondering what his motivation for that, because she was not, he was also, as almost all of them are, they're leftist leaning.
They are.
And I said, well, what's wrong with you? He goes, well, we don't like to, because that's not a consistent philosophical system. And I'm sitting there scratching my head, because every one of the Marxists I've ever read in classes, because I had sociological theory classes, which mixture of philosophy, like the sociologists, like Durkheim and all these people we quote now, Marx and Engels and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there like, well, they're morally inconsistent in their own life. Ayn Rand at least embodied quite a bit of what she stated, quite a bit more than if you want to. And how you can say she had an account for everything. She had a system of metaphysics, ethics, everything else within her philosophy. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was the most asinine comment I've ever heard somebody say that wasn't a consistent philosophical system.
Yeah, you can't mention Ayn Rand's name without being challenged almost in every department, because that is not where they are philosophically. And to mention Ayn Rand is to create a certain heresy. I've been in too many different meetings where my voice has been singular in those seminars I take, and where I'm in these meetings, or maybe they'll have some person come in from outside. They're getting ready to bring Jonathan Kozo on the campus, and they have on the website of the university, they have a student who is reading, at least they have the book open. I don't know if they're reading it or not. It seems like it's a cameo shot, but but they have the book open. You can see the title of the book and the author's name, Jonathan Kozo. So I know what they're bringing in there. Kozo has a book out,
Savage Inequities.
Savage Inequalities.
Yeah, it's like that was out for about 20-some years now.
Yes, and it's some other book he's written now, but it's always the same thing that he's always writing around the same leftist paternalistic outlook that he has, and that is we have to help these children, and nothing that they're doing will be of any consequence. We got to get in and intervene and make it happen in their lives. We can't tell them to study, though.
You know what's really ironic? It's ironic about the leftists I saw on campuses is that they push for egalitarianism, but they were like rock stars. They'd show up to class. You couldn't really directly. No, it's a few of them that were really okay, but their arrogance and their attitude, like everybody else is beneath them, really betrayed their idea of what they state that they're saying. They're out there for egalitarianism, because they're not. If you don't have a pedigree, you ask a question coming from your perspective about something they're stating, they're going to rip you to shreds because you don't have the pedigree, intellectually they allege that they have. So basically, they're looking for validation by going to the right sources, what they consider the right sources, the correct sources. So they have this hierarchical structure too, and they have this orthodoxy in the sense that they don't want to challenge. They're no different than the establishment that they said they went against. Matter of fact, they're far more abusive than, because they're more accommodating. The orthodoxy of the establishment of the 70s still value the First Amendment.
Yeah, you're quoting John, that book you let me read by David Horowitz. That book. He was on the left, and he wrote about what he's now saying on the college campuses now compared to what it was when he was over on the left. He was saying at least when you went to class and your viewpoint during the times when the conservatives were more or less running the universities in the country, that at least when you wrote things that they may have disagreed with ideologically, they didn't take a grade and put it on your paper because they didn't agree with your ideas. And there was a free flow and exchange of ideas, respect for the ideas unlike the ones that they were holding. And you can still raise your hand in class without being excoriated for saying something that was considered to be unorthodox by the person standing in front of the room.
The word idiot has been thrown about by both sides so much. I don't even know what that word means anymore, because it means if you don't agree with them, anybody who says you're an idiot for saying something. I mean, the idiocy is very hard to pinpoint. I mean, walking off a ladder or something like that, maybe when you're, or not walking down the steps or something, not looking, I guess I consider it an act of idiocy. But, extreme indifference to the realities or whatever. But just because you don't agree with somebody, that doesn't, and they don't agree with you, does not make them an idiot or doesn't make them an idiot. Mm-hmm. Basically, there's only some ways you can get things done. One way is saying you're going to have to do this, as other people are saying the people have to do it to themselves. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, I think it should be in the people's hands instead of depending on this egalitarian society. Mm-hmm. So saying it should be in the people's hands to make the decisions, and basically you could insulate and isolate when they screw up from other people that have to pay the price for their suffering, their stupidity, or their inaction, or whatever. But it basically goes down to the old adage: the left likes to share misery.
That's what they're doing. They don't want to see anyone that has shown a way in which we can all have quality of life above the average standard. And the fear is that their ideas would be proven wrong just by the exercise of freedom in these countries where they have taken over the reins of power, and they're going to, through fiat, make it happen, although we have no example of anywhere in history where through government fiat laws, those things that we talk about being egalitarian in the end result has ever resulted from anything government has done. And when I travel, I see it all the time. I mean, I have not been in one country yet, and I've been into a few of them now in terms of having traveled, so I'm pretty much aware on all sides of the continent, except even in Egypt. So I've been in the northern part of Africa also, not just in the western and central part of the continent. I've been in about 17 countries in Africa, and I can pretty much say that that what I've noticed is that where the ideals of socialism reign supreme, and that's what you have when your government, you have from the top, you have decision making from the top. That's socialism.
That's a great point. I'm sorry to keep on.
Go ahead.
But the people always say, well, trickle-down economics don't work. Socialism is a trickle-down economic system. It's from this decision made from the top down. I just made this point yesterday with somebody.
Yeah.
They said, well, trickle-down doesn't work. And I went, yes, it does work. It does work in capitalism. It doesn't work in socialism.
Yeah.
Because basically jobs, there's so many examples of it. I'm sorry.
You're making an excellent point, and I love the exchange. You're making an excellent point that this idea that they have the power to make your life better by simply passing laws to do it, and that by government fiat or government force, that's what it really is behind the scene. There's a gun. Malinow talks about there's a gun in the room, and when government gets involved, it's no longer a voluntary exchange between the two persons involved in negotiation, establishing a contract between the employer and the employed, or in the marketplace between the consumer and the producer. There's a voluntary exchange that's taking place in terms of the producer and the person that's consuming that which is produced. Until they can voluntarily agree upon what the price of that production will be, then there is no agreement that's possible, and neither one can force the other to agree to the terms if the person doesn't agree with those terms. Well, government comes in, and that's what I saw that's what I see when I travel. They come in and they act like they know because they have the power to make the decision. Therefore, they are omniscient in terms of being able to bring the right result about. And I see it all the time in those countries, and I see that it suppresses the entrepreneurial class that would develop if there were other conditions that were able to prevail, and they would have a chance to get off the blocks without being impeded without having impediments put into place by government, then you could have the kinds of things that happen when ambition is in fact nurtured, rather than squelched by persons telling them that whatever you produce, we're going to take it and give it to those that didn't produce anything. And what the end result is what you see in those countries where no one has anything. As that one person told me, and I heard it more than just one time, and that is, there's no work here. And I asked, by the way, I asked in some of those countries, because I saw a lot of people that were idle. A lot of the adults are idle, and the children, nothing for the teenagers to do. The only thing that was positive about that is that they didn't have anything to do, but that don't mean they're going to hit you in the head and take what you have. None of that was going on. But I didn't see anything that they would remotely could say that in the future they're going to be doing these things here, and this is the work that they're aiming to do, just walking around, nothing to do. But that happens in places where the government is making all of the economic decisions, even in terms of what I saw where His Excellency, you have to say that when you're in Gambia, His Excellency Yahya Jammeh, who I heard under the surface, and I don't know what he's hearing, I'm sure he knows, but I heard on the surface comments when I was over there, and I was listening to when they were not afraid to speak, because I was nurturing conversations and having them when there was a certain amount of isolation in what we were talking. But in public, there were some things you would not be able to get anybody to talk about. But privately, sometimes you could get these 2 o'clock in the morning kind of talks I was having, and you'd have them to give you the real, as they say, the real okie doke. And what they were saying is that there's no work here, and they were blaming the leadership for the conditions that prevail. And of course, what happens when you go and study, and I always try to look at the economics when I go to these countries to see what is happening in terms of how the country is run from behind the scenes. And the way that happens in Gambia, and I saw it also in the Central African Republic, but I saw it more so in Gambia. And the way it works there is that the president sets the salaries for all the workers that are working at jobs, and it's like $1,500 a month. Now, I don't want to even tell you what $1,500 would be in American currency, because you wouldn't believe it. I'm working every day, working 5 days a week, some working 6 days a week, and having $1,500 a month to show for it. It's not like you're going to be able to put anything aside, nor are you going to be able to meet your expenses, because the price of things goes up, because what happens is they're inflating the currency, and so they limit the workers by the law of how much the employer pays the workers. Now, what happens is that then the government, which doesn't tax the income of the workers, what the government does is it goes and places a tax on the business. And the business has the money to pay the taxes because they're not paying the workers anything. And so what the government does is it extracts the people's salary, is what it amounts to, from the businesses that didn't pay them anything, and they go and tax them, and the government doesn't have the hands on the taxation of the income, so they can't see the taxes that are being how the taxes are being run. I think some did say though that all the money goes to the government. So some of them were aware of that, but it's a little finessing that goes on in these countries, and I don't see how in the long run. And this is not a pessimistic view; it's just a point of looking at the reality. I don't see that changing in terms of how that's going to play out any differently. I've been having discussions with some of my friends, on that since I've been back, and they want to talk about, the modernity and this is the 21st century, and they're back in that period, and blah blah. Well, that's modernity also. I mean, both are happening simultaneously in the same time period. It's not like they're like you're operating over here in this time period, and over there they're operating in the Stone Age. They're operating in the 21st century also. But the paradigm the cultural paradigm is different, and I don't see as I go through those countries and I look around and I talk to people and I look at how things are working, I don't see how that changes because America became great because of the laissez-faire aspects of his economic system. I'm reading that in the book. John, I don't know if you read this author right here, but this is Murray Rothbard.
I read some of
his work.
Yeah.
Well, he's the scholar that he is.
Yeah, he taught at some college, University of was in Nevada and Las Vegas. That's where he taught at, and he also was I think he was an Austrian school of economics.
He's Austrian School of Economics for sure.
He's also a personal confidant of in connection to Ayn Rand too.
Ayn Rand, and he on that same school as Hyatt and the Mises Institute, as you said, and those scholars over there that were writing coherently about economics. Certainly they weren't in the school of John Maynard Keynes, who I can't understand anything he's saying. I think that Paul Krugman went to the same economic schools.
Krugman is nothing more than a Keynesian.
Keynesian.
Yeah, he's like, you read that autobiography of his. Oh my God, the man was a decadent individual, arrogant, very arrogant.
That book woke me up to a lot of things that you wouldn't know just from the outside. I mean, I knew there were some problems there, but when I read the autobiography, it was a biography
biography
of John Maynard Keynes. It was amazing and eye-opening.
It was bigger than the Bible.
Yeah, it was bigger than the Bible. I mean, that book was. I think that book was bigger than Shower's book. And when I read Shower's book, I thought I was going to have to be there for about 2 years just reading it.
Mark Shower?
William Shower, the Rise and Fall of the Third.
I read that one in 10th grade.
Did it take you a while to read it?
I actually used it for an independent reading class, and I basically racked up all my points for that semester to get an A. You had to read so many pages.
Yeah.
That went better over half of what my grade was supposed to be for one book. Yeah.
I read 100 pages a day for 15 days. That book had 1,500 pages, but it was easy, reading, and a page turner. But I really have paid attention to when countries are poor. I try to pay attention to why that is so, because no country should be poor. I mean, lack of resources doesn't make a country poor. It's a resource within the people.
Look at Japan.
That makes it poor. And look at many places in Europe. When Europe was entrepreneurial in its
Netherlands. I mean, the Netherlands were poor. They didn't have that many.
Don't have that many resources in Europe, and they did not take the resources as is commonly thought from those countries that they were, in fact, over. They certainly were using that which was not being used that they needed, but they put much more in place than that which they extracted. And if that's not true, look at the places when they left at that time, and look at it now. When I was in Africa in 2010, and I was in certain countries, they were reminding me we didn't have a good soccer team, but when I was in Ghana, which that year had the best soccer team on the continent of Africa, the Black Stars, and the continent. I don't say the continent was celebrating the Black Stars. Ghana was certainly celebrating the Black Stars. Everywhere I went when I was in Ghana, I saw a flag. And I would ask them, is that flag because you're celebrating the country? No, they don't have that much. It's not so much patriotism of the country. They would say, no, it's Black Stars. So the soccer team was being celebrated. But flags were in the taxes. They had flags everywhere celebrating the Black Stars. But what you had there was the games being held in South Africa. I can tell you, having been to Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa, that there is no, and looking at the infrastructure of Nigeria, where the power collapses on a regular basis, and the water doesn't flow regularly because they have to now turn it off and get the level of energy back up to pump the water through the system. So the water, you have to capture your water and put it in a large container so you have water when you need it, if you want to take a shower and things like that. So I can tell you right now that there was no other country in Africa, and there are 54 countries in Africa, 48 of which are below the Sahara Desert. And I can tell you right now, there was no other country in Africa, of all the nations, north, south, east, west, doesn't matter. There was only one country that could have hosted the World Cup in 2010, or could do it 4 years later in 2014. I mean, they went to Brazil, and they were able to build a stadium there to accommodate the games, but the infrastructure had to have been in place for them to do the rest of it, because you can't be housed there. You got to have a place for the people to stay, and you got to have enough accommodations to take in the persons that are coming from all over the world. There's only one place that could do that in South Africa, and that says a lot about the kind of structure they had in South Africa as opposed to what prevails in the rest of those countries in Africa, and we got to get real about that. And I don't see. I just don't. As I try to go through those countries and look at it from an outsider standpoint and trying to be objective about what it was I was looking at, and I think I was pretty objective in it in saying that this is a systemic problem, and I don't see the necessary interventions that were there. I saw a lot of cultural impediments that pretend a similar circumstance in the foreseeable, and even if I'm going to be absolutely truthful about it, in the foreseeable future as well. I just don't see how it changes. The culture is such that it holds traditions in place, some of those traditions of which do not serve the ends of greater wealth creation and development in those countries where I was. And as I said, I've been in 17 countries, so it's not like I'm not aware of how comprehensive the problem is, although I've not been in all 54 countries, but I've been in a third of them. And I think that's pretty much is the going rate in those that I've not been in as well. I have been to South Africa, and I see South Africa as being out of the cut above the fray, because for the most part it had market forces running the economy. There were some impediments in place, but that was out of the racialized view of the country, which was putting restrictions upon labor because they wanted because the system, the capitalist system, would in fact favor the workers that it will bring in at a certain price. And it didn't care what color it was, so apartheid would interfere with that. But for most of it, it was a capitalist system that was operative in South Africa that explains why it is so much ahead of the other countries on the continent of Africa. And I just don't see, and I have to be honest, I just don't see how that's going to change in the countries where I have, where I've been. Now, if anyone knows anything different in being in some other places, I've heard Botswana is a model on a small scale. I don't think it'll have any resonance on a global scale, but inside of Botswana, they're saying that there are some market forces that are allowed to operate, and they have a economy as a result of it that is better than what you have in Africa at large. But that is not saying a whole lot because of the kind of economies you have in Africa, where people are making $1,500, say, for example. And when I was in the camera rooms, the people paid in CFAs, similar to what you see in Senegal, and I didn't see anyone riding in Rolls Royces or even roads that will allow you to ride on side streets in any kind of car. You wouldn't you wouldn't buy a Rolls Royce anyway because you tear it up.
So ways we got a lot in common with Africa.
We have now
here in Flint, that is.
There a lot of they had one place that was we're moving so far away from capitalist production in this country that I saw one state, I forget where it was, that was putting tape down on the concrete in the middle of the streets, taping the concrete together because it come apart, and they didn't have the means to fix it, and they're putting tape on the streets, trying to keep it from parting even further and creating greater distress in the roads. And that's the consequence of it. But those countries never tried capitalism and don't even have the fumes of it as we have here. You see the evidence of that. And when we get ready to celebrate in the future our Labor Day, as we did last week, I hope you'll wake up and understand we got to celebrate that which gave labor something to do. And that's all the ones who are being vilified right now. That's why this book is so good, called The Case Against the Fed. This is one of Rothbard's books, and it's really just a magnificent read. I'm almost at the end of it right now, so I'll have this read by the end of the day. And I wanted to, as I said last week, I want to read a couple of things out of the book by Charles Adams, because I think we've got to come to an understanding of some things that are happening in the United States if we're going to remain anyway viable in the 21st, in latter part of the 21st century. I don't even know if we'd be viable at this rate if we are, as we go toward the middle of this century, because we're losing so much on a daily basis. And I think it's on all cylinders. I even read an article yesterday about another person losing their team. John, did you see Levinson, this thing about Levinson, who's the owner of the Hawks basketball team? I think it's the Hawks. I think it's the basketball team. Yes, I think it's a basketball team. Yeah, because if it had been hockey, then they would not have had any blacks there. So, so it's about the. Did you read what the Levinson issue about him now selling his team?
No, I didn't hear about this one.
John, I couldn't believe it. He wrote an email to the general manager, and he was saying that Atlanta is not attracting the kinds of fans that can pay for the tickets, season tickets, that would raise the revenue, because they are fearful of the coming downtown, seeing it as a place where a large number of blacks are, when they see blacks in the stadium, and they think that they're not safe. And he was saying, well, no, it's not a problem in terms they are safe. We haven't had any incidents, but the perception is that. He was saying that which is true. And they're now making that an issue. He said that they wrote the email to the general manager in 2012. They now had, so they put it on the website. Now he is getting ready to sell his team because he made some comments. Captain, it's good to see you in the studio, and I'll see you on Thursday as well. And look, Catherine, we haven't even finished that other book yet. We're getting ready to go into another book. That's Catherine, who is the leader. She's really the leader of the study group we have on Thursday. They gave me the title, but the real leader is Miss Catherine Williams, and I know that even she doesn't. But you know, the books point out what we're missing, and that is that we were great because we had a number of things going here that wasn't going on elsewhere. And now that's going on elsewhere, not going on here, we're losing some of that greatness. And we are, I hate to say this because we don't want to reconcile with the reality, but America is now a third world country. I see poverty here. It's certainly not the poverty I saw when I was in Africa, but I'm talking about the poverty level from where we were to where we are right now. We still have the one television set, at least in a household. We have air conditioning in many of those households. But when I look at how the houses look and the communities that they are housed, where the housing is housed in, what I see is nothing. I see nothing but debilitation. I see a downward spiral in those places. The inner cities are leading the charge in that respect. And we're not on the level of the countries I was in, but that's because of the fact that even residuals of capitalism produce a more positive result. But where it's never been tried, which is where I was, you see the poverty at another level, a much lower level. But I see it here as well. And when you look at these books I'm reading, when I read these books now, The Case Against the Fed, and this book, which is a marvelous book by Charles Adams called The Good and Evil, The Impact of Taxes on the Course of Civilization, I can just tell you that we're heading on all cylinders in the wrong direction. And it's not going to go well, because where it has been tried, where we never had the entrepreneur class in place, it has not gone well. And as we go in that direction ourselves, going toward that which has never worked, thinking we can make something work that has never worked in the history of the planet, I can tell you right now we're not going to have a good result. And we're heading in that direction at full speed. People out here the other day in Flint, demonstrating for $15 an hour because they need $15 an hour to maintain their lifestyle, and want to do so by staying at minimum level, which are entry-level jobs, and are looking for some type of law that can be passed to rescue them from what is not a law that is the problem. The production is the problem. And if you cannot produce $15 of wealth, nobody's going to pay you $15. In fact, you can't produce $15 of wealth and get $15 an hour, because you got to produce wealth above that in order for the businessman to keep the lights on. And so when you're talking about $15 an hour, let's look and see how that is produced. And it does not come out of somebody in Washington, a bureaucrat, which is what they're doing in Africa. When that's going to work, it's not going to work there, and never has worked, and not going to work here. And we had something different in place before we tried to make it work here. And that is, you can't pass a law and raise the level of salary level up, the wages up, and don't raise in a corresponding way the production up to cover the wages, because cost has to be paid. And I noticed that none of the government officials that are passing these laws are saying they're willing to pay it, go in their pocket and pay the cost. They want the proprietor to pay it. And what the proprietor is going to do is going to do what they've always done. They're going to seek a way in which they can stay in business by avoiding that cost, which would put them out of business. And that will come through innovating away the jobs, because at a certain point, when you raise the cost of the labor, you will make it less prohibitive for them to go to another route in order to get the labor issues resolved.
You know what I don't understand about the minimum wage increase, the big push for that? Why don't they address the root of what causes cost of living to go up? And it's got to be, taxation's got to be addressed. I mean, it just seems to be totally ignored. And it's a government-created problem solely.
It is a government-created problem. And the other thing, and this is what Roboff is talking about, John, in the book called The Case Against the Fed, what he's talking about is this other aspect of it, and that is the printing of money and the creating of false economy. You know, this printing of money he makes. I'm going to read this next week when we talk more about economics, but he makes some great points about how this printing of money is unnecessary, and how this is what is driving the prices up when there's no production. The price being driven up artificially by all this money being printed out here, chasing these goods that are at a low productive rate, and they're driving down the price, which ensures that you're not going to be able to hire anybody, because because the dollar's not worth anything. You're not making any money in the production that you have on the table already. So a lot of it is what you said, John, but it's also the problem of the printing mill. And Roboff makes an excellent point when he says that when you make money, whatever that money is, the currency of the nation, you don't have to print any more of it, because it's already validated as a currency. And they just keep on printing it anyway. And by printing it and putting more of it out there, you see what happens here. It weakens the dollars that's out there. In fact, the dollars, if you look at the Constitution, really, the printing of the dollars is really unconstitutional. The fact is that it says Congress has a right to coin money. There's no authority in the Constitution to print money, and they don't dare put money on what they're printing, because they know it's not money, it's paper. It's fiat, currency not backed up by anything, not even by gold, which they took. The United States was taking off the gold standard in 1971. But it's really amazing to me that the politicians don't see, maybe they do see it and don't want to get out of the way, but they don't want to, whatever the reason is for it, they don't get out of the way of the economy thriving, so that we don't need them to be making these fiat laws. They do it because if the economy was able to churn along without them, then the obsolescence of politicians will become more clear, and we wouldn't see the need to have these incumbents up there until they fall over at their desk. And I think that's a fear that they have. And I think that's validated, by the way, in terms of what I'm reading in these books by Charles Adams and others. I think Charles Adams and these others are validating why the politicians are interfering in the economy in such places as Europe and in the United States. And we are all these countries that once were thriving are all worse off because of it. I think we've gotten into a place where we have these autocratic leaders acting as if they are third world places, and they are running third world policies that is interfering with the kind of development that we need to have go on and once went on before they began to interfere. If they don't know that, then they're not paying attention, because we can trace the interference back to the times when the economy was in fact doing badly. In fact, you can read the book called The Housing Boom and Bust, or you can read the book by Swaker called The Architects of Ruin, and there's not one person on that front cover that's not a politician in terms of him saying these are the architects of ruin. They're not naming the ones that the politicians name, the bankers, the wealth, all these distractions that they name. They never name any politicians. The bankers are the problem, the speculators are the problem, the capitalist system is the problem, the ones that are making a lot of money, they're the problem, but no politician is ever identified, and no policy they pass is ever the problem.
Yeah, look, they always complain about the people avoiding taxes. The same guys who created the loopholes for them to do that are the ones complaining about it.
Yeah, and not paying taxes themselves.
I mean, it's absurd. And yet they'll find excuses for it, and nobody holds them accountable. They're not thrown out of office for this. I don't know what we allowed too much to go on.
I'm going to be battering the notion in my Facebook post. That's when I do my series. I'm going to be doing a 4-part series on the Federal Reserve and the economic system. I write it better than I can say it, but I'm going to be doing a post on that. And one of the things I'm going to be trying to point out in terms of the politicians is that we've got to see the real problem in the political arena for what it is, and not see it through party lines and party affiliations, which I think is another distraction. We got to see it in terms of incumbency. It is amazing to me that in America we can have these hidden, I call them hidden tyrants. We can have these hidden tyrants who won't leave, and are not leaving for what reason? Because they're doing what? And the ideas they have not gotten out, and what are the ideas that we're talking about? And how has any of that leadership we have under their being there the number of years, how has that served us in terms of what we see having taken place in the past that we're now seeing the dividends of, or the lack therein, at the present time? I mean, what is it that they have yet to do, on a positive note, that remains to be done that they are going to be doing in the future, based on what they've done in the past? I want an answer to that question. If nobody minds, I have to get an answer to that question, because incumbency, to me, doesn't make any sense. Where the country is right now, it just doesn't make any sense.
You know what, though? If you were like a person working on the road department and you didn't pave that section of road, everybody going by there notice. The things they do go largely unnoticed because the press finds it won't sell papers, or B, knows it's so inflammatory if they actually printed all this stuff out. Another thing is, too, we have a largely uneducated public about what they should be looking for. They get so caught up about who's for gay marriage and who wants this and who wants that and who's for this, they say. That's what they make a big issue of. Guess what? If you look at the brass tacks, what would we care if somebody else did something as long as we didn't have to pay for it? Mm-hmm. And make them hold account. But see, people get so sidetracked so easily.
They get sidetracked so easily, and I don't think the American people get it. We were trying to figure out, we were trying to discuss what percentage of the American people, quote unquote, really know what is going on. And when you look at these on YouTube and some of these videos they have on where people go out in the street with a microphone, got a camera, and they ask these people such things as, can you name one person in the Congress as a senator? And if people can't name one senator, or they ask them some other questions about the government, and we'll tell them some ridiculous things, and people are believing that. Well, they'll say, George Bush now just signed a bill into law, and what do you think about the bill that he signed into law? I think it's wrong. Because the name is wrong. So, and I mean, some people don't even know the man left office, and they cultivate that by saying it's Bush's fault. And the man left office 6 years ago. But it's amazing, and I think that we're not paying attention to some of the real problem. We say the politicians, yeah, they're a problem in Washington. But you know, we got to be honest. A large part of the problem in this country are those that's voting for these people. I mean, what's the problem here? These people got an $18 trillion debt. And that's just the debt we've incurred now that we run headlong into. There's some other debt down the road where those chickens are scheduled to come home to roost. And some of those chickens haven't even been hatched yet. So this is just not even the tip of the iceberg. And the ones that caused that are the ones that's been in there since Methuselah was born, and they're going to get elected again. They're now saying they're saying that, I heard this on the way to the studio today. One of the radio programs was saying that there's a 4% differential in terms of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in terms of the likelihood of the Republican Party taking over the Senate in 2016. Now, let me say this. Neither party is worth a quarter. So it's not about Democrats and Republicans. But the ones that's doing this in right now is not the Republican Party. So if you're going to go one to the other, it shouldn't even be close at this point. Because the one that's doing this in now, the one just took over your health care. And now they're saying, oops, we didn't do it. We disagreed with the president, and we don't go along with him, don't want him to come on the campaign trail. And now people are forgetting how that happened. Now, I know the Republican Party is not going to rescind Obamacare. I'm not buying what Ann Coulter is talking about in terms of her thinking that if we get a Republican Senate, they're going to vote to repeal Obamacare. You put some power in the hands of these people as politicians and see if they give it back. Let me see an example of that, where you give them some power, and because they want the party that brought that result about, therefore they reject the power, and therefore it's back in the people's hands respecting the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. I don't see any evidence of that, and I don't think that ain't going to happen. No chance of it happening. When they get in there, Obamacare is going to be on the books. You can just forget about that. But at least let's look at punishing the ones that brought the result about in the first place. And incumbency, we had declared war on incumbency. Because those people up there are nothing other than Castro without the dictatorship being open. They are hidden dictators. I've been writing about that for the last 2 days. And I'll be writing about that some more because I want to drive home this point. With the little influence I have, the 5 people that's reading what I write, only about 5, but that's 5 five the most enlightened person on the planet. But I'm just saying that we don't get it in terms of the 95 percenters that are still thinking that government is the answer when government is, Ronald Reagan said this, government is the problem. Government is not the solution, government is the problem. Well, let's get more specific than that. The politicians are the problem. And they think that they can run everything as bureaucrats, sitting out here passing laws, and it's going to make things better. Well, that's what they're doing over there in Africa. And it ain't working over there. And it's not going to work if we try those kinds of things over here with the government getting more and more intrusive and taking over more and more of the economy and trying to run it from some air-conditioned office, people that haven't run anything except running the country in the ground, trying to run a business from 1,000 miles away from where the businesses are located. Okay, John is now getting ready to cut his throat off. He's sawing his neck off over there and telling me to get out of here. So I'm going to do that. And Before going, I want you to read some of these books now, between now and next week. America Alone is a book. You got to read Mark Stein's book. Breitbart's book, The Case Against the Fed. Read that book in particular. Murray Rothbard, that book's got to be read. Charles Adams' book, The Good and Evil, The Impact of Taxes on World Civilization. This is a major book here. And I love this book by Adams, by Woods. It woke me up, not woke me up, but it gave me some insights I hadn't had, because I'm a history major, political science major, economics. And I hadn't read some of the things he writes about in the book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. Okay, gotta go. Until next time, want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.